he can just throw this in, start with immigrants, then turn to asylum seekers. Oh, it's unhealthy, guys, for you to do that. And somehow we're supposed to feel bad because this guy doesn't know how economics works.
It is unhealthy to link housing to the volume of people that are coming here to seek refuge and asylum. Equally unhealthy to relate it to immigrants. That the price of houses has jumped as a result of interest rates, and affordability has jumped as a result of that. That isn't because of volumes that we are seeing. At the same time, and these are two truths that can be the case at the same time, it's no surprise that people that are here temporarily, as economists measure, do put pressure on what they call the cost of shelter. This is more of a humanitarian challenge because the type of shelter that we would deploy as a responsible country to welcome these people, affordability has struck every single part of the country, and that is not something that asylum seekers have created, nor should they be held responsible for.
His very first statement, guys, I want you to notice that he starts out by saying it's unhealthy to link asylum seekers. And then he switches to immigrants. Immigrants aren't asylum seekers. And so right off the get-go, he throws in a curveball. You got to actually listen with these guys. He can just throw this in, start with immigrants, then turn to asylum seekers. Oh, it's unhealthy, guys, for you to do that. And somehow we're supposed to feel bad because this guy doesn't know how economics works, because he doesn't know that if you have 2 or 3 people fighting for the same place, it's going to drive the prices up. He doesn't know that it's our responsibility as a country, sure, to handle the asylum seekers. But when it comes to immigration, those are 2 different items. And he's the immigration minister. It's amazing that he found a way to keep a straight face. Unless, of course, he doesn't actually know what he's talking about. You've got 5 people that all want a place to live. If there's one place to live available, then the 5 of them, and I don't care where they're from, they're going to try to fight to get that one place to live. Now, I think he's trying to cut a few hairs there. Oh, asylum seekers. Well, that's not the majority of the immigrants that we have. In fact, they're not called immigrants in that case. Those are called refugees. Now, we have a whole lot of refugees that we are bringing into the country. And yes, it is the government's responsibility to do that, which is why they're paying for refugees to live in hotels. Immigrants are people that are coming here to immigrate to this country. And so they want to live here on a permanent basis. They're coming with means, with families, with money, and they are going to be looking for shelter in the form of rentals or a house if they're able to afford it as soon as they get here. What are we talking about here, guys? How foolish do they think we are? That somehow we don't understand if there's more people, the cost is going to go up? I've said this before. I've said it a number of times. I want you to take a look at this. These are residential numbers, inventory numbers for Canada. Now, there's a problem. There is no such thing as Canadian real estate. We do not have a Canadian real estate market. When you're looking at real estate, you've got to look at provincial, you got to look regional, and you've got to look local to really get a true understanding. These numbers would suggest that across Canada, investors are slowly taking over. And that is not the case. There are certain locations in Canada where investors are tending to buy. In fact, that is always the case throughout history, that investors are going to try to buy up more and more areas in certain cities, in certain towns. That is a normal way of life. And so we, as citizens of Canada, have done what we've always done. We go find some place that's more cost effective. You move out of the major urban city, you get a nice large plot of land with a nice big house. So when you see these numbers, yes, they do point to investors making more investment into housing. Absolutely. But please do not fall into the trap that thinking that this is everywhere. It is regional. It is local. What do these announcements by the Bank of Canada really mean for you and I?
Today's decision reflects the Governing Council's assessment that a policy rate of 5% remains appropriate. It's still too early to consider lowering the policy interest rate. Recent inflation data suggests monetary policy is working largely as expected, but future progress on inflation is expected to be gradual and uneven, and upside risks to inflation remain. Governing Council needs to see further and sustained easing in core inflation. CPI inflation eased to 2.9% in January. This largely reflected lower energy prices, an easing in food price inflation, as well as weakness in semi-durable prices like footwear and clothing. But shelter price inflation remains elevated and is still the biggest contributor to overall inflation. Looking ahead, we continue to expect inflation to be close to 3% through the middle of this year before easing in the second half. Gasoline prices are expected to continue to add volatility to inflation in coming months, and shelter price pressures are likely to persist. In other words, the path back to the 2% target will be slow, and progress is likely to be uneven.
He just told us that he wants housing to come down. If you're a homeowner, what in the world does that mean for you? They want housing to come down? That means they want the price of your house to drop. If they keep on this trajectory, that's what they're aiming for. Yes, that's right. Your house going down in value. Now what do we have as the other side, the counter to that? Is that we have such a low supply of houses in this country, in North America for that matter. But in Canada, we have such a low supply that it continues to put demand on housing, especially as we continue to bring more and more immigrants into the country. It's just putting more and more pressure on the price of houses. So just be cognizant when he talks about trying to get inflation to come down, he's actually trying to force some deflation. Does that really help you and I? Okay, what do we do about that? What do you and I do when we look at that? Obviously, we try to pay down our bills. We try to save money in different places. We try to avoid certain expenses. That's what we try to do. And that's effectively what the Bank of Canada is trying to get us to do so that inflation can go down. Just be aware of these other implications, these other consequences. And then the little part about gas that he just threw in about gas volatility. Right now, if they were lower interest rates, we would be below the inflation target. Right now, people could afford their houses that they live in if they were to lower the interest rate. Look, they told us they wanted to hold rates. They found a way to keep rates steady. We know that in the US, the Federal Reserve also kept their rates steady. And here we are getting locked in for another few months before we see the rates drop.